Hi, Mike Brantley, auctioneer. Talking today about auctioneers having bidders that don't pay. They bid, but they never pay. So the property's still sitting there. Could be a car, could be a bedroom suite, could be, for that matter, real estate. But it's still sitting there. You're waiting for a payment, never arrives. So what's the auctioneer do? A lot of auctioneers say, well, I just sell it next week, or I just sell it whenever I want to. It's mine now. I pay the seller and then I just move on. Interesting. It's interesting because an auctioneer even suggested, he said, well, if you're going to do that, I'll consign a $50 item to your auction. I'll come down to the auction, bid up to $500 on it, and then leave without paying. Now, I'm the seller. You didn't know I was bidding on it, but I'm the final bidder at $500. Maybe I register under another ID or something, or send my nephew to bid. So the item that's worth $50, more or less, sells for $500. Auctioneer says, that's fine. I'll just pay my seller and I'll sell it next week. And the next week it brings $40 because it wasn't worth $500. This bidder yelled out 500 or made sure it brought 500. Maybe conspired with some other people to ensure it brought 500, so he gets paid 500. Unless your contract says specifically that property that doesn't get paid for transfers to you as the new owner. By default, if you're taking consignments, the seller, your client, owns that property. When you say sold, by default, title transfers to the new owner, or maybe it transfers, maybe your terms say transfers when they pay, and if they never pay, who owns that property? Well, the seller still owns it. You don't own it. The seller still owns it. As I have routinely suggested to auctioneers with any number of questions that I get or post on Facebook or otherwise, I don't know what to do in this situation, or here's what I do in this situation. What I do. Oh, really? You do that? If you're dealing with a client's property, seller's property, what's the first thing you should do? Contact your seller, or as I've suggested, ask your seller. Sell this tractor. I said sold, $17,500. Bidder never showed up at the cashier table. I saw his truck heading out the driveway there. Tried to call him. Phone number was bad. Address was bad. I don't know how I even got a number. But here I got this tractor sitting here, $17,500. I guess I'll just put it in next week's auction and see what it brings and send my seller a check. Or, as I've suggested, some auctioneers say, well, it's my tractor now. I'll pay the seller $17,500. I'll put my name on it. You didn't buy it. Did your contract say it belongs to you now? I doubt it. Mr. Seller, it's Mike. We had a great auction today. We really hit it out of the park, if I could say so myself, with that one tractor, lot 17. I said sold for $17,500. The guy has disappeared. He's gone. I'm willing to give you $17,500 for the tractor, and I can, maybe use it or resell it or whatever. If you want to keep it, I don't see any indication that he's going to take possession or interest, or that we can't even get a hold of him. What do you want me to do? Now, if the seller says, yeah, he never paid for it, you can't get a hold of him, whether he has ownership but hasn't paid, you have a lien against it conceivably, or your terms say that he doesn't have title because he never paid for it, what have you. Isn't it just the right thing to do? Talk to your seller. Talk to your seller. Had an auctioneer message me not too long ago, and he said, I had a car come into our car auction, and he said it had 23,000 miles on it. And we did the, online, you can check or what have you, and it's 123. not 23, it's 123. And he said, you know, this is 6 digits here, and there's no 1 there, it's a 0, but everything says it's 123. He said, what should I do? I said, what should you do? I mean, what have you done so far? He said, well, we talked about changing the ad. We talked about saying add 123. I talked about it, maybe showing 23, but we have information leading us to believe it's really 123, and maybe it's been altered, or the odometer's, who knows. I said, you talk to your seller, talk to the client, talk to the owner of the car? No, not yet. Really? Really? You're working for the seller. You're working for the owner of this car. You don't own this car. You've been hired to represent the seller in this transaction. There's a problem. There's an issue. The mileage isn't right, or there's a question about the mileage. And you haven't talked to the seller about it. It's his car. Call him up. Say, hey, I know that thing reads 23, but, we're seeing 123. Well, yeah, when I bought the car, they had a VIN mix up. It might, there could be some story to this, but you're not investigating. You're not talking to your seller. Well, you talked to the seller up until you got the consignment. You met with him 3 times. You talked to him on the phone 6 times. You went out to dinner once. After you get the car, it's as if he doesn't exist. Well, the contract's signed. Why would I want to talk to the seller now? Well, in particular, after the contract's signed, you're his agent. You were talking to him all that time without being his agent. That was on you. You signed the contract, an agency contract, and now you're not talking to him. This is when you not only can talk to him, you must talk to him. If there's an issue with that car or that gun or that flat wall cabinet, there's an issue with the real property. The acreage doesn't seem right. There are tandem bedrooms. We're counting that 3 bedrooms. That should be 2 bedrooms. Who do you talk to? Your seller. Talk to your seller. Last thing here. There are sellers who hire auctioneers, quite frankly, to not deal with it. And you could, I've called sellers, you have called sellers, hopefully, you auctioneers. And the seller said, you know what, I don't know what to do. It's up to you. You're in the business. You're the one. That's why I hired you. To help me out here. What do you think I should do? I mean, what's your recommendation? Well, you've done your diligence. You've talked to the seller. You've explained the situation. Your seller has said, I want you to decide or tell me what you recommend. That's all fine. That's fine. I'm just begging you to stay in touch with your seller. And if your seller has an answer and it's legal and ethical and reasonable, follow those directions. And if your seller says, I don't know what to do, what do you recommend? Recommend something reasonable, ethical, legal. Recommend a resolution. Discuss it. You're on the same team. Seller's hired you to handle it. Seller wants a voice in how it's handled. It's their property. Mike Brantley, auctioneer. Wonderful to have you here. Other videos on this same page, other videos forthcoming. Have a great day and stay safe.